Four Knights of the Apocalypse chapter 241 is officially out, and we have the full-blown confrontation between the Four Knights of the Apocalypse and their future children, the Knights of the Holy Grail. And this chapter has an insane fight with how things go with our main characters, a glimpse into what their future might entail, and we get to see a lot more of what the Holy Grail Knights are indeed capable of, and leaves our characters in a very difficult situation right now, as the Holy Grail Knights might be a lot stronger than we initially thought. But we're going to jump into all this in just a second, but before all that, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps, and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. We are almost at 39,000 subscribers, almost at that 40k mark, so let's try and get to 50 before the year ends. That's going to be a major milestone for the channel. I would really love it if we manage to break that. And if you want to support me outside this channel, go and check out my second channel, GW Comics, where I talk about comic books and just anything related to comic books in general. It's a lot of fun. It's a passion project of mine. I would really appreciate it if you guys go and check it out whenever you get the chance. Now then, let's jump right into chapter 241 of Four Knights of the Apocalypse, titled The Four Knights versus the Holy Grail Knights. The cover image of the chapter is the four knights facing off against the Holy Grail Knights. Note that only 4 are visible in this page, which is a very good detail because we will see Cartiez, the one that turns invisible, later on. The chapter begins with Lancelot and Galahad trading blows. Lancelot, barehanded mind you, managing to parry and block all of Galahad's blows. As Lancelot begins to go and ask, what kingdom do they belong to? Are you Holy Knights of Camelot? With Galahad saying, yeah, we most certainly are Knights of Camelot. But what kingdom are you serving? And as they continue clashing, Lance says that they're Holy Knights of Leonis. You don't even know that about us? But Galahad says that with that knowledge, they now have proof that they are fakers, because the Four Knights of the Apocalypse apparently are the heroes of Camelot, which is insane. Now, Lance doesn't believe that, saying that he's getting nowhere, and Galahad kind of agrees they're kind of getting nowhere with this conversation, seemingly, and so Lance pushes Galahad back. So this is already, to the start of this chapter, a very cool and interesting way to basically give us an idea of what the future of the Four Knights of the Apocalypse entail. We all know in Arthurian legend, the Four Knights of the Apocalypse that we have right now are basically members of Arthur's Round Table. However, in this series, they're Holy Knights of Leonis, and seemingly Arthur right now, they're finally starting to get at least some understanding on who Arthur is. But the fact that Galahad says that they are Holy Knights of Camelot in the future is an interesting thing to actually reveal, because at this point, this can mean that we're going to have a brand new Camelot that Arthur is going to reign over as king, but would also make us think, wait, does that mean something happens to Leonis? Why would the Four Knights basically swear their allegiance to Arthur and be his Holy Knights? What happened to Kath? What's going on in the future for them to be known as heroes of Camelot, not Leonis or just Britannia as a whole? That is an interesting piece of information that we got here, and I'm genuinely curious to see what the full story is as we basically get an actual look into what their future might entail. Now, cutting over to some of the other battles we see, Percival is battling against Lohengrin, and he's pretty easily and nonchalantly blocking her blows since he's sparred with An a number of times and seen her swordsmanship. Lohengrin, seemingly being trained by An, he's able to see through a lot of the standard attacks and techniques of this fighting stance, which pisses off Lohengrin to no end, as apparently Percival is using the same sword that he would use in the future, calling it a replica, and is also very angry that he can see through her moves. But Percival just says, okay, hold on a second, we need a timeout. And then Percival starts acting like his usual goofy self, is like, hey, you're pretty damn good with a rapier, you know? Like, who taught you? And we got the comedic Lohengrin just slamming herself onto the ground like, what the hell is going on? Stop messing with me. But Percival's being honest, saying, I'm genuinely impressed, so, I just got curious. So Lohengrin sheathes her sword, says that her teacher is Angalhad, vice captain of the Holy Knights. And this shocks Percival, but he then instantly goes into being super impressed and happy for An, saying oh, I knew that was her sword technique. That is insane. I kind of figured you might have been trained by her. And Percival's like, oh man, I kind of had a suspicion up till now about this, but gee, Antachi, that's no wonder then. But then I realized the obvious contradiction, but wait, when would she have become a vice captain? But as Percival's distracted, Lohengrin tries to attack Percival with the blunt end of her blade, with Percival easily dodging. But she actually uses her ability Stun Beat due to the power of her enchanted Thunder God Sword Staff, which paralyzes and shocks Percival in an instant. And this also pisses off Lohengrin as he literally calls Angalhad on, saying, "Don't you dare refer to her so informally." So yeah, Lohengrin's magic and weapon is a magical staff that doubles as a rapier. So that's actually really cool, giving both short range and long range attacks potentially, but also giving the illusion that you are just a swordsman and fighting with a staff that can, at the blunt end of it, shock and potentially stun your opponent. That is actually really, really cool. But it's in that moment from the stun, Lohengrin calls out to Cartiez, and Cartiez, still basked in an illusion, ends up saying, "May the gods punish him," and unleashes the bow of the sacred tree as this one singular spear scatters into a barrage of arrows homing in on Percival. As Percival is like, "I gotta get out of here," but he is shocked and paralyzed, with Cartiez unveiling slightly from the illusion, saying, "Farewell, my good faker." And Percival is hit by these arrows and becomes the Blackthorn Winter. He turns into a freaking tree. So Cartiez's powers seemingly just turn anybody hit by this particular configuration of the Spirit Spear into a tree. I'm curious to see where this goes. Also, did we just turn into Boruto? If you haven't been reading Boruto's manga, you know why the fact that someone turning into a tree is like crazy for 2 sequel manga as well. But yeah, Percival is seemingly taken out and incapacitated at the moment, which is very unfortunate. How is he going to get out of this one? Tristan notices and calls out to Percival, but ysaye, I'm very bad at pronunciations. I gotta learn how to pronounce their names now because like I feel very bad for mispronouncing some of these names. But Tristan's son lunges forward saying, "Do you really have the time to worry about others?" and uses thrust anger to hit Tristan with a barrage of weaving attacks with the spear. Tristan swings up into the air and says, "Okay, let's just end this quickly then," and unleashes Falling Star full force with his goddess powers against ysaye. But instead of dodging, he jumps straight in and takes Falling Star full force. His helmet is flown off and his armor is seemingly destroyed. And Tristan's shocked. "Hey, why did you go head first into my attack right now? That was so reckless." But ysaye ends up standing back up, saying, "That's not bad. It took a lot out of me. But now it's really boiling," as he refers to the demon blood within him, as he gets a very crazed look as he unleashes his ability Black Awake, as he gets what looks like a silver or perhaps white marking on his head, similar to how Tristan and Meliodas get their demon marks on their foreheads. He then flaps his goddess wings and then lunges forward towards Tristan and shouts that he should just die now, as we get a closer look at the V-shaped marking on his head now that he's awakened his demon powers, as he then charges towards Tristan with his spear. Tristan guards with the Percival sword. However, it is pierced right through, hitting Tristan square in the chest, seemingly dealing a finishing blow. We then get the battle between Gawain and Llywarch, as she is casting Exterminate Ray and Blitz Javelin towards Gawain, and Gawain just launches Exterminate Ray, as it's 2 Exterminate Rays against Blitz Javelin and 2 Exterminate Rays. Gawain counters Exterminate Ray, but dodged out of the way of Blitz Javelin. And Gawain notices that Llywarch's casting time is so short. But Llywarch ends up stating with very big confidence, "Oh, do not think ill of me, faker. The broad smile mask works with my mind to let me have my chanting time for 20 minutes a day. With every spell you unleash, in other words, I can produce 2. Which means that by using this, she can shorten her chants and do multiple spells at once, depending on how many chances she can shorten in a short time. So Gawain might be able to unleash Exterminate Ray one at a time, but due to the length of the chants, Gawain is at a disadvantage now with this magic item that makes things easier for her daughter to actually outplay her in terms of magic. And Gawain is saying, don't you have pride as a sorceress or anything? What the hell? But Llywarch says, I know many people who let their pride spell their doom. And this does kind of strike a nerve with Gawain, because like, okay, I kind of see what you mean to an extent. And she's like, you know what? Screw it. In that case, I will beat you with brute force, as she goes into her, from what I can tell, 60 to 80% form of Dawn to try and smash straight at Llywarch. She then casts 2 spells at Gawain, Frozen Grave and Magic Dissipation, as Gawain is encased in a giant ice pillar to her shock. But she then begins to say that she can just melt out of this block with the power of Dawn. But then she notices that the magic she has is dissipating from her body. So the 2 spells that were unleashed by Llywarch were not just to encase her, but also the ice itself is seemingly draining her magic power at the same time while she's encased. So this is a very interesting and really cool way to deal with power for magically powerful opponents, and it's also a hard counter for Gawain, since Dawn's magic power is literally transferring her magic into physical strength from the power that she has stored over the course of a finite amount of time. So now Gawain is losing her strength by the second, and she's stuck, so it's going to be hard for her to get out of here. But it's then that Llywarch begins to unleash another massive spell called Judgment of Death, saying you will atone in the afterlife for staining the hero's name with your treachery. And in an instant, Gawain is seemingly erased in a flash from existence, as the pillar and her in it have disappeared, seemingly evaporated away, with no signs of life. As Lancelot looks over to where Gawain was, Percival turned into a tree, and Tristan stabbed with a spear. We then cut over to Llywarch grabbing the Holy Grail, saying that it is back with us. Llywarch and Cardiez are together, and Ysaye says, alright Galahad, just one of those little runts left. Hurry up and finish him off. As the chapter ends with Galahad ready to square up against Lancelot. And after the concern of what happened to his friends, Lance is now truly beginning to lock in from this serious look. And that's where the chapter ends. And also, apparently, we have a surprise break next week, so there will be no chapter next week, and that is unfortunate. But this stuff happens. But regardless, this was a really, really good chapter, and I genuinely enjoyed the action. Are the Four Knights of the Apocalypse safe for maybe Lancelot on Fraud Watch? Or is this just the surprise attack hitting them, and now they're going to launch a full-blown counter? Either way, the fact we got to see more of what the Holy Grail Knights are in fact capable of, and how this could entail to how strong the characters of the Four Knights of the Apocalypse get in the future potentially, is pretty fun to look at. And these characters might be a lot stronger than we initially thought. The Four Knights might be grossly underpowered than what they should be in the story right now. We know outside of Lancelot, the Chaosified Four Perils utterly destroyed Percival, Gawain, and Tristan, but if they were in the right matchups, they would have done well. And this might be similarly the case against the Holy Grail Knights, because Gawain basically is fighting someone that has their enchantment time and can cast 2 spells at once for a limited time every single day. And this is something that Gawain has been training to do for a while, shorten her casting time so that she can launch multiple powerful spells at once. And this is something that she is still struggling with. So I am incredibly curious to see where that will lead. And perhaps the mask that her future daughter wears is her own creation in order to help her do so. And that would be an interesting way to see where Gawain's journey into becoming a better sorcerer and casting more spells at a shorter time frame could lead. Tristan's son, Ysaye, is an interesting case because he's accessing his demon-powered boost while still in his goddess form. His marking isn't even purple or black, it is just straight up white seemingly. And he just needs to get his engines revving. Perhaps he's more so a tank. He takes damage, and it gives him the physical boost of a demon without going full demon mode. And it might be a future way of showcasing how Tristan might be able to utilize his goddess and demon powers almost simultaneously. That is something I'm genuinely curious to see. The abilities of Lohengrin and Cardiez are also very interesting. Obviously, Cardiez is the most interesting one with the future version of the Spirit Sphere Chastity Fold, and has an ability to literally launch a bunch of arrows and basically petrify someone into the form of a giant, massive tree. And it works out with the fact that Cardiez and Lohengrin seem to work as a team. Lohengrin paralyzes and stumps the opponent, while Cardiez finishes them off with the Spirit Sphere. It's very nice, and a really cool way for siblings to fight. But lastly, Galahad we don't see much of in terms of combat, and I am genuinely curious to see where this is going to lead us, because I honestly really want to see how the battle against Lancelot is going to turn out. And Lancelot is the last man standing against the Holy Grail Knights. Do I think the Four Knights are going to get a second wind and actually start taking this even more seriously and start perhaps thinking smarter in terms of how they fight? Yes, and I think this could be a good way to boost the Four Knights in terms of their overall combat power and the way that they fight. But if that's not the case, we're just going to get Lancelot potentially carrying this section of the story again. And while I love Lancelot to no end, and while I think he is the coolest character, my favorite character in Four Knights, I do think constantly giving him all the big opponents and saving everyone's asses all the time makes the stakes feel less important, unfortunately. So I gotta see him get an even fight against Galahad, but I don't want him to lose, and I want the Four Knights to actually come back out of this with a much more solid plan on how to use their powers, and perhaps even taking Lancelot's previous advice from the Four Perils and swap opponents for whoever is the best matchup for them, or use their powers in different ways. That could be it as well. Well, that's it. What do you guys think of this chapter and everything that's happened in it? Leave your thoughts, opinions, and theories in the comments section down below. And once more, if you haven't already, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps, and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. I will get at least 1 or 2 videos if I really have the opportunity to fill in for the lack of a chapter review next week due to the break. So we'll see what I can come up with for that break in order to hold you guys over for that time. But with all that said and done, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and hope you all have an awesome day.